Let's get into this conversation because we talked about the Arsenio show, and of course at that time it was very iconic performance. You know, Arsenio introduces Prince. Uh, I believe this. I can't remember if this was before the Arsenio performance or after, but the MTV uh, performance
Yes.
of "Get Off." Uh,
Yeah.
take us back to sort of the planning for this. Does Prince say, "Hey, I'm going to do a big TV performance. I want something different." Can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah. Sure. Well, we knew as the wardrobe department, we knew at the time we were going to Los Angeles. He was going to be on the MTV Music Awards, and then we were going to do the Arsenio Hall show. I mean, it was, of course, it's always like, okay, well, what are we doing for the Arsenio Hall show? Prince was always in charge of what they wore. So he had, let's call it his closet. Let's call it the band's closet of clothing that they had to pick from. And then also we were constantly making clothes at the time. And I would feed him, by the way, I would show him sketches via portfolio. Maybe I might do 15 sketches, something like that, or more, maybe 20. But sometimes it was requested, specifically what he wanted. Let's do Nehru jackets. He kind of decided he wanted to do some Nehru jackets. So I gave him a portfolio. So let's say I spent a week working on that. But for the MTV Music Awards, we were like, what is he going to wear? And we had made some really cool clothes for him. But Therese, his secretary, came up to the wardrobe department one day, and this was not, I mean, it was very close to the time where, he was going to be going on to Los Angeles. And she said, well, you better sit down because this is what he wants for the MTV Music Awards. And it was so funny. That day, it was just funny, but nerve-wracking because we knew that we had to achieve this. So what she said is she gave us the parameters that he had given to her. The outfit must be yellow, it must be lace, and it must have the butt out. And so I was like, well, what does that really mean? What does that really mean? And so I had to come up with or I decided it should be two sketches, one with maybe more exposure. So maybe the exposure was going to be all the way down the leg. So it would be his butt showing and then, maybe his upper thighs or something. I always believe you need to give people something to say no to. So I didn't want to present it with just one idea and one sketch. I wanted to give him, at least two sketches. And so between me, Heidi, and Jim, we had to decide at that moment, what is the lace going to be? What lace do we have in-house? Because we're talking just a few days that we had to get this together. Maybe, I don't know, less than a week, let's say. And so we chose a lace that we had worked on with before, but it was white and we would have to have it dyed. So immediately we took it to the dyer, but of course not before I gave him the sketch. So I was able to use that lace as a sample so that I could sketch with that. And I came up with two sketches, and then I had to present it to him later that day. So I said, okay, I'm ready to go down to his office, down the hall. And I did. And man, I was so nervous because how do you present something like this to a guy? It's like, well, here's your butt. It's totally exposed. And so I walked in very, very professional, and I, tap on the door and walk in. I said, yes, I have your sketches. And so I sat down at his desk and I just, laid them out. And I said, well, now this one has more exposure and this one has less. And he just took a pencil and he crossed out the one with more exposure. So I said, now that's a guy with modesty. He only wants to show his butt. He doesn't necessarily want to show the rest of his legs. So of course, I'd never seen his butt, so I didn't know. In terms of the build, how are we going to build this thing? How are we going to make it really stay on his body? Is his rear end really going to be showing? Well, no, we have to make it stay on the body, so it has to be an illusion. So we had to have all of that dyed skin tone. And it was kind of hysterical going to the dyer because, we can't really get a skin tone, so you're going to have to maybe guess.
Couldn't get a color match on that one.
Yeah, so she did a fabulous job. And also the fact that it was one of the fabrics that I chose, it was very, very sheer. So that's what it was. So we started making it right away. Jim had used a pattern. We used a pattern that we had before with certain modifications, and the lace had to be appliqued onto that sheer fabric. And then, of course, in the front, you had to have a more opaque fabric to cover up the naughty bits, so they say. And so that's what we did. And we made it just in the nick of time. In fact, when I was on the plane going to Los Angeles, I was still stitching lace to one of his shoes.
Wow. Now,
and yeah.
Well, just in terms of it's such a tight time frame, does he try it on before? Do you know if he tried it on before?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he tried everything on before. And of course it would be like, well, did Prince try that on? So a lot of it was sort of guesswork with Prince, because it wasn't like a usual person where you would say, we're going to have a fitting. I want to make sure that it fits in all the right places and that it looks great. And that's where Jim Sharon came in, because he knew Prince's body so well. And if Prince said, this is too loose, make it tighter, well, we knew that maybe he had lost weight, on a tour or something, and we needed to nip some things in. It was all guesswork. If somebody says shorten the sleeves, well, usually you have them put the jacket on and you will shorten the sleeves and say, is this okay? With Prince, there was none of that. And I think Jim Sharon, it was almost like he was a magician in that he was so good at what he did in tailoring, and he knew Prince so well after being there for so long, that he could guess. And he'd say, well, I think Prince has probably lost this much weight, or I think Prince probably means this, or, a lot of it was deciphering too. So as far as your question, I'm sure, yes, he did try it on. And I think we always had backups too. No matter what was going on, no matter what the function or the tour or the show, of course we would, Leanne would line up, a bunch of his costumes, because he's an artist. And like anybody, any artist, he may change his mind. He may use different things as sort of a meter as far as what he wants to wear. So we had other things lined up for him if it didn't work out.
What did you think when were you there at the MTV Awards yourself? Were you guys there?
Yes, I was. I was right backstage. It was really exciting for me. And, of course, it was a secret. We weren't to tell anyone that what he was wearing, and it was to be a secret. So when people backstage saw it, there was a big buzz. It was pretty exciting.
Wow. What did he ever give you any sort of nod or anything after it was over at any point? It's like, hey.
No, he really didn't. I think that was a real gamble for him, needless to say, because it was all over the news. It was actually really, really smart that he did that. It was all over the news. Excuse me. They called it the Swiss cheese. Oh, they called it so many different things. One news reporter called it the Swiss cheese outfit. And then they started calling it the butt out costume. That was a little, it was just, you know, it kind of said everything that it needed to say, right? But it was a, excuse me, it was a gamble for him to do that. Mm-hmm. And he did not, it wasn't all, you know, roses the next day. There was a lot of fun poking and a lot of, I think even Arsenio, like backstage, had said something to him about it, and people teased him about it. But ultimately, I consider it a smashing success. It still is sort of dubious. It still is sort of like, well, I don't know if it's like, if you could say it's a high point, but it's certainly the most notorious costume he ever wore. And that in itself is something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because looking back at it now, to me, it was one of the things I think that sort of like opens the door. Of course, we've seen a lot of outlandish and out there type of stuff on the awards show, but it was such a splash at the time, and I could see how it influenced other people to be like, oh, okay, if this man can do something like this, like me as a woman, I'm gonna, you know, how do you top that, you know?
I think, I mean, many people say only Prince could have gotten away with that, and it's true, because one thing I think that's really, really important to note is his stature, and that he was able to wear almost anything, and also his attitude and the way he wore something. It wasn't just that he could wear it, but it was the way that he wore that thing with confidence, and anything else that he put on, he wore it with confidence, no apologies. Now, depending on how he really felt inside, he could go and change if he wanted to. But I think people thought, wow, oh my God, that's amazing, because he gave us the impression that it was amazing.